Getting sidetracked a little bit here by skulls. Welcome back, detectives. My name is Manon and I read mysteries, and boy, do I have a mystery for you today. This is a mystery novel, and this is not clickbait, that stumped the queen of crime herself, Dame Agatha Christie. The book in question is a golden age crime novel, and today's video I thought we could do a little bit of a deep dive. I'll start with like an introduction to the book and a little bit of a plot summary, and then we'll go into who wrote it, and most importantly, and perhaps most interestingly, the context associated with the original publication of the story. And that's where Agatha Christie will come into play. And at the very end of the video, I will give my own little thoughts and review of the book, which I think is going to be a little bit easier to talk about once I tell you like what the book is and how it came to be. I think my review is kind of dependent on like what this thing is. So that's why I'm leaving that to the end. So without further ado, grab your beverage of choice, get cozy, and let's dive into the curious history of the Wintringham Mystery by Anthony Berkeley Cox. A quick pre-introduction, because I think things are going to get a little bit tricky. This book has lived a few different lives, and I think that it is one of the most interesting things about it, but it's also one of the most confusing things. So let's just go over some general publication history for the book. When the book was first published in 1926, when it was serialized, as we'll discuss, it was published under the title The Wintringham Mystery by A.B. Cox. That was his pen name for the book. And the mystery in the book features a disappearing girl, and in this first version of the story, her name was Stella. In 1927, the book was published as a novel under a new title of Cecily Disappears and a new pen name of A. Monmouth Platts, which is a mouthful. And as you could tell by the title, the name of the disappearing girl in the story was changed from Stella to Cecily. The version I read was, of course, the 2021 release of the book, re-release. They went back to the original title of The Wintringham Mystery, and they used Anthony Berkeley's actual name, Anthony Berkeley Cox, as the author. The name of the disappearing girl, however, remained Cecily in this new version. I don't know what I'm going to say going forward. If I say Stella, I mean Cecily. If I say Cecily, I mean Stella, and both titles of the book are valid, although I think pretty obviously The Wintringham Mystery is the better title of the two. It is a pretty typical Golden Age crime novel. The mystery takes place at a countryside manor. It has a large cast of suspects, a good number of clues and red herrings, a seance, and of course, a really clever, if amateur, sleuth. Stephen Monroe is our main character here. He is probably one of my favorite amateur sleuths in literature. I really enjoyed him. The book opens with him kind of explaining his financial situation. I guess he came into some money, spent it all, now of course is in dire need of employment. It sounds kind of desperate, but in reality it's executed really brilliantly, and he has this like upbeat sense of humor about everything. So when he gets this job, he doesn't have this issue of like humility or what is the word? Like an insecurity about it. Anyways, he takes a job as a footman at Wintringham Manor in Sussex. The manor is hosting a handful of guests at the time. And of course, most of them are people that Stephen himself knows because he used to be part of their class when he had money. Now he is serving as their footman. It's all very lighthearted, and he's among good friends, essentially. One of those good friends just happens to be a love interest as well, which was, I thought, really cute. Of course, this group of people decides to hold a seance, and what happens during a seance in a mystery novel? Usually murder, but this time it wasn't murder, actually. It was a disappearance. This is the point where Stella/Cecily disappears. I had to say that like 5 times. My God. Stephen pairs up with his love interest, and then they investigate the case together. From then on, it becomes a really typical mystery with suspect interviews, clues, red herrings, secrets. You get it, right? It's great. Very classic and very funny. Anthony Berkeley, as a person, wrote humor. It was a pretty big cornerstone of his writing style. He served in World War I, and then when he went back to England, he started a career as a journalist, and so that's how he got into writing. He wrote under a number of different pen names, as we've already learned, and also a number of different genres like detective, obviously, as well as humor. Obviously, he wrote some of the earliest psychological thrillers, which I thought was quite interesting, as well as, of course, short stories, very common of the era, even stage and radio plays, and a comic opera. Man loved humor, I guess. His most famous works include The Leighton Court Mystery of 1925 and The Poisoned Chocolates Case of 1929, both of which featured his amateur sleuth, Roger Sheringham. He also wrote, of course, a number of standalones, like psychological suspense novels, which again were kind of like early examples of that genre. One of those was Before the Fact from 1932, which I learned recently inspired the 1941 Hitchcock film, Alfred Hitchcock's film, Suspicion. Really great film. From my understanding, though, it wasn't really based on the novel, it just took pieces of inspiration from it. But additionally, and the whole reason why I wanted to talk about him as part of this video in the first place, he founded the Detection Club. This is how I first found out about him. I think it's one of his most interesting, fun facts. You can't really talk about Golden Age crime without talking about the Detection Club. He founded it in 1930 as sort of a dinner club for crime writers who met frequently for dinner and also to discuss and collaborate and help each other out with their various projects. While he founded the club, you might be more familiar with some other famous names associated with it: Dorothy L. Sayers, Agatha Christie, G.K. Chesterton, John Dixon Carr, really heavy hitters in the genre that all came together for this club. Really fascinating time in crime fiction history. One of my favorite things about the club is they had this really elaborate initiation ritual. I would call it a ritual because it involved a skull, real life human skull. This is Eric the Skull in a photo with Dorothy L. Sayers, one of my favorite photos of all time. Apparently it was lit from within with red lights and they would use it during the initiation process. But I am getting sidetracked now. So let's go back to 1926 when Anthony Berkeley writes Cecily Disappears, or The Wintringham Mystery. See, I'm already getting mixed up. According to the 2021 introduction to the book by Tony Medwar, the inspiration for the novel and its publication contest was Anthony's own appreciation for this style of mystery. Actually, I have a quote from Anthony Berkeley Cox to read to you. "In my early, more modest days, I thought I should be satisfied if I could puzzle 49 readers out of 50. But later I became more ambitious and I began to wonder whether it would be possible to devise a problem which would baffle all but a small percentage of more than 1 million readers. I realized that it is not in the intricacy of the puzzle that is set, but in its very simplicity that success may be achieved. It took me several months to hit on the idea of the Wintringham Mystery and as many months to write it. In fact, I don't mind admitting that I have written it 7 times over and it has been the greatest fun throughout." It was first published as a serialized novel in the Daily Mirror. This means that it was published piece by piece over the course of days or weeks. This was not an uncommon practice at the time, but a really unique thing about this book is that it was published alongside a contest. And that's where Agatha Christie comes in. The Daily Mirror challenged its readers to solve the mystery themselves and to submit the answers to 2 questions. Number 1, how did Stella disappear? And number 2, who caused her disappearance and why? For the correct solution of the contest, the prizes were substantial. These are actually insane. The first place prize was £250, which in today's United States dollars was $24,000. The second place prize was £125. There were also 25 £5 consolation prizes to give out. When the 15th installment of the story was released, it was accompanied by a note explaining that the solutions had to be provided in 150 words or less, and that, quote, all the clues essential for the successful solving of the crime had already been published. Now, I admit when I was reading the book, I was really hoping to find that point where the 15th installment supposedly was released. I wanted to know where you understood that everything was available for you to solve it. It wasn't really marked or identified in the book, at least the one I read. But at some point, you are supposed to be able to figure it out. Now, I know I told you a little bit about Anthony's own reason or purpose for creating this mystery, but there at least seems to be a little bit of a precedent, at least one other contest that was similarly published. This happened 3 years prior in 1923 when another British paper called The Daily Sketch serialized a novel called The Mystery of Norman's Court by John Chancellor, which apparently is a very forgettable book and author. I've never heard of him. This is another locked room mystery also set in a country house. Sensing a theme here with Golden Age stuff. But the prizes for this one were even more insane. Let me get this right with my notes. First place prize was for £1,000, equivalent to almost $100,000 today. Perhaps the funniest or most interesting thing about this is that Agatha Christie also entered this competition. She actually won a runners-up prize that was equivalent to about $3,000 today. I don't know where these papers are getting this money, but I'm sad that print media does not have this kind of funds to give away as cash prizes, but whatever. It is no surprise then that 3 years later, Christie also enters the Wintringham Mysteries contest. But the difference here is at this point in her career, Christie was really becoming well-known. She had some really high-profile novels already, like The Mysterious Affair at Styles, The Murder on the Links, the man in the brown suit. So that meant that her name, especially in a mystery competition, might actually be recognized. So unlike in the 1923 competition, when she entered this one, she entered under the name of her husband, Colonel A.E. Christie. Did she win? No, I think that's pretty obvious, but I don't think it's fully fair to say that it stumped her and her only. The Daily Mirror reported that they had received, quote, many thousands of entries, not just from Great Britain and Ireland, but also from countries like France, Italy, Belgium, Switzerland, Poland, Austria, Romania, Turkey, and Holland. But out of all of these thousands of entries from all of these countries, no one provided a, quote, wholly satisfactory solution. So obviously the editor wasn't capable of giving out the cash prizes as originally planned. So instead they decided to divide the first and second prizes among 5 competitors of equal merit. And Agatha Christie actually received one of the £5 consolation prizes, which in today's US dollars is equivalent to about $480. But don't feel super bad for her, because she took away something that is arguably more valuable than a cash prize, although I would not look down on an extra $480. She was inspired by the contest. And I feel very clever because while I was reading this, I actually picked up on this. She wrote a novel called The Sittaford Mystery, really enjoyable murder mystery, published in 1931 that actually used a similar newspaper contest element as part of the plot. As for the Wintringham Mystery post-contest, Anthony Berkeley Cox took this book and rewrote parts of it, and like I said, republished it under a new name, Cecily Disappears, and under a new pen name, A. Monmouth Platts. I hate both of those names. I think the original is actually like so much better. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the 2021 version that's available right now is the 1927 version of the book with the 1926 name. All right, so if you are sticking around this long and you want to hear my own review of this book, here we go. I gave it 4 stars. I think the humor here is really what sells the book for me. I found it really enjoyable from that perspective, and also just from a golden age perspective. It's really nice to read a book that's 100 years old and have so much of it still translate, because there's just so much of that humor and fun, like human element to it, that just, it still makes sense today. I also am just quite interested in reading golden age stuff because of the class system that comes up quite a bit in this book, and a lot of Christie does this as well, where they explore like wealthy people versus servants. And I think Stephen's position as a footman in this context is a really good way to illustrate those like relationships. And on top of that, I'm just a sucker for any kind of country manor house or locked room or closed circle mystery. I just think they're really fun. The downside to this book, and this is what I put in my Goodreads review actually, is that it drags under the weight of its red herrings. There is a lot going on in this book. There's a lot of suspects, there's a lot of clues, there's a lot of red herrings. And to be honest, I don't really blame anyone who entered that contest 100 years ago for not getting it right. I think it's pretty impossible to guess the right thing here, simply because there's just so much going on. It's not not as fair as I think it could have been. Of course, I am reading the edited version of the book and not the original version from the contest, so maybe there's some changes or nuances there where my experience is different from the original one. But I got the impression overall that Anthony Berkeley Cox was really trying to make this impossible to solve. He really wanted to be a little devious with it. And to be honest, that is just not the best feeling to have when you're reading something that is supposed to be a fair play mystery. This is just my opinion, and I do think that overall the book is worth a read, not just from like an enjoyment perspective, but also when you read it knowing this whole history side to it, this contest element, it makes it a really exciting little read. That covers everything for me about the Wintringham Mystery. If you've read it, I would love to hear your thoughts on the book, or if you plan to read it, do let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts when you do. I will also just do a little side note. It is not as wintry as I was expecting. I think the description made it sound like it was a wintry book, and the title, of course, alludes to this like holiday setting, which is why I read it in December, but it's not like that at all. Sittaford Mystery is, though. That is a very Christmassy mystery. It's very snowy, so keep that in mind. All right, everyone. Happy sleuthing, happy deducting, and happy detecting. Take care.